What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a normal interview and instead gets ambushed by a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? In just 35 seconds of brutal exchanges, everything falls apart. The cameras keep rolling. The audience sits in stunned silence. And what unfolds is one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Samuel L. Jackson arrived at the Today Show studio that morning like he had done countless times before. He was there to talk about his latest film, to share some laughs, to connect with the audience watching from home. He settled into the guest chair across from Savannah Guthrie with a relaxed smile. The lights were bright. The cameras were ready. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But from the very first question, something felt off. Savannah leaned forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "So Samuel, let's talk about your career. You've been in what, hundreds of movies now? Do you ever worry that you're just playing the same character over and over again?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't the warm welcome anyone expected. Samuel kept his composure, chuckling slightly. "Well, I think every actor brings something different to each role. I take my craft seriously, and—" "But seriously," Savannah interrupted, her voice taking on an edge. "When was the last time you actually challenged yourself? When was the last time you did something that wasn't just you being, well, you?" Samuel's smile faded just a bit. He sat up straighter. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at, Savannah. I've played everything from dramatic roles to action heroes to—" Yes, we know," she waved her hand dismissively. "But let's be honest with the audience here. You've become a bit of a one-trick pony, haven't you? You show up, you say some cool lines, you collect your paycheck. Is that really acting?" The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members exchanged shocked glances. This wasn't banter. This wasn't playful ribbing. This was an attack. Samuel took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his professionalism. "I've worked in this industry for decades. I've been nominated for awards. I've worked with incredible directors, and I've always given everything to my performances. I'm proud of my body of work." "Nominated," Savannah repeated, emphasizing the word. "But how many have you actually won? I mean, let's talk about that. You're what, 70-something years old now?" "I'm 76, Samuel corrected, his jaw tightening. "Right, 76. And in all that time, with all those movies, you've never won an Oscar. Doesn't that bother you? Doesn't that tell you something?" The audience gasped. A few people whispered to each other. This had crossed a line. Everyone watching knew it. Samuel's face hardened, but he kept his voice steady. "Awards don't define an artist's worth, Savannah. The work speaks for itself. The connection with audiences, the stories we tell, that's what matters." "That's a nice way to avoid the question," Savannah shot back. "But come on, we're all adults here. You must feel some kind of way about being passed over year after year, about watching younger actors, less experienced actors, walk away with the recognition while you're still waiting." "I'm not waiting for anything," Samuel said firmly. "I'm grateful for my career. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and be disrespected on live television." Savannah laughed. Actually laughed. "Disrespected? I'm just asking questions that I think our viewers want answered. Isn't that my job as a journalist?" "A journalist asks fair questions," Samuel replied, his voice rising slightly. "What you're doing is trying to tear someone down for entertainment. There's a difference." "Oh, please," Savannah rolled her eyes. "You celebrities are so sensitive. You can dish it out in your movies, playing tough guys and saying whatever you want. But the moment someone asks you a real question, you fall apart." Samuel stood up. The microphone clipped to his shirt picked up every word as he said, "I came here in good faith. I came here to have a conversation. But I'm not going to sit here and let you insult me, my career, or my integrity. Sit down, Samuel, Savannah said dismissively. We're not done here. Yes, we are, he replied. I've been in this business long enough to know when someone is trying to make a name for themselves by stepping on someone else, and I won't be a part of it. Savannah's face flushed red. You're being completely unprofessional right now. We have millions of people watching. You can't just walk off. Watch me, Samuel said. He reached down and unclipped his microphone, setting it carefully on the chair. You know what the problem is? You think because you have a platform, you can say anything to anyone. You think you can be rude and condescending and call it journalism. But that's not what this is. This is you trying to create a moment at my expense. I'm creating a moment? Savannah's voice went up an octave. You're the one throwing a tantrum on live television because you can't handle a few tough questions. Tough questions? Samuel shook his head slowly. Tough questions are about the work, about the craft, about the industry. What you're doing is personal attacks disguised as journalism, and I'm not interested. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out what to do. Should they cut to commercial? Should they let this play out? The audience sat frozen, watching this confrontation unfold right in front of them. Savannah stood up now too, her face twisted with anger. You know what? Maybe the reason you never won an Oscar is because you can't handle criticism. Maybe the Academy saw through whatever act you're putting on. Maybe they knew you weren't worthy of their recognition. The words hung in the air like poison. The audience collectively held their breath. Even the cameramen looked shocked. Savannah had just said the quiet part out loud, had just revealed that this wasn't about journalism at all. This was personal. This was meant to hurt. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but filled with disappointment. You know what's sad? You had a chance to have a real conversation with someone who's lived through decades of this industry. Someone who could have shared stories, insights, experiences. But instead, you chose this. You chose to be cruel. You chose to try to humiliate someone for ratings. And that says everything about you and nothing about me. Get out then, Savannah shouted. If you're so offended, just leave. We don't need you here. You're right, Samuel said quietly. You don't need me here. But maybe ask yourself why you felt the need to do this in the first place. What are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to impress? Because I guarantee you, this isn't going to end the way you think it will. He turned and walked toward the exit. The cameras followed him, capturing every step. Savannah called after him. This is completely unprofessional. You're acting like a child. Samuel paused at the edge of the stage. He turned back, and for just a moment, the legendary actor let his true feelings show on his face. Not anger. Not rage. Just deep, profound disappointment. I've been called a lot of things in my life, Savannah, but unprofessional has never been one of them. Until today, apparently. I hope whatever you were trying to accomplish here was worth it. And then he was gone. He walked off the set, past the stunned crew members, past the producers who tried to stop him, past everyone. The stage was left with just Savannah, standing there, her chest heaving, her face flushed, as the reality of what just happened started to sink in. The camera swung back to her. She stood there, microphone still in hand, trying to compose herself. Well, she said, her voice shaking slightly, I guess we've all just witnessed a very immature display from someone who should know better. But nobody in that audience was buying it. Nobody watching at home was buying it. They had all seen what really happened. They had all watched as a respected actor was attacked, belittled, and disrespected by a host who seemed more interested in creating drama than conducting an actual interview. One audience member stood up and started walking out, then another, then another. Within moments, nearly a third of the studio audience was filing toward the exits. They didn't boo, They didn't shout. They simply left. It was a silent protest that spoke louder than any words could have. Savannah watched them go, her face growing paler by the second. "We'll be right back after this." "Commercial break," she stammered. But even she knew that whatever came after the break, nothing could undo what had just transpired. In the moments before they cut away, you could see her standing there alone on that stage, the weight of her choices finally hitting her. She had gone into this interview with some kind of agenda, some kind of plan to create a viral moment. And she had succeeded, but not in the way she had hoped, because what people would remember from this interview wasn't some clever gotcha moment. What they would remember was watching a host betray every principle of good journalism. What they would remember was watching someone try to build themselves up by tearing someone else down. What they would remember was the moment Samuel L. Jackson, a man known for his grace and professionalism, was pushed too far. The control room finally cut to commercial. The stage lights dimmed, and Savannah was left standing there in the half-darkness, probably realizing that in trying to create one kind of memorable moment, she had created something else entirely. Something that would define her career for all the wrong reasons. Samuel L. Jackson, meanwhile, was already in his car, leaving the studio behind. He had maintained his dignity. He had stood up for himself. He had refused to be a part of something that went against everything he believed in. He had nothing to apologize for. He had nothing to regret. He had simply drawn a line and refused to let anyone cross it. The interview that was supposed to last 15 minutes had ended in less than 10. The promotional appearance that was supposed to boost the film had turned into something completely different. But in those heated minutes, something important had been revealed. Not about Samuel L. Jackson. Everyone already knew who he was. A professional, a craftsman, a man of principle. No, what had been revealed was something about the nature of modern media, about how far some people will go for attention, about how easy it is to forget that the person sitting across from you is a human being with feelings, with a lifetime of experiences, with dignity that deserves to be respected. Samuel had walked onto that set expecting a conversation. He had been prepared to be charming, funny, insightful. He had been ready to promote his film and connect with the audience. Instead, he had found himself in an ambush, and rather than play along, rather than smile through it, rather than let it slide, he had made a choice. He had chosen himself. He had chosen his self-respect. He had chosen to say no. And that choice, that moment of standing up and walking away, said more about his character than any award ever could. Because it takes real strength to walk away. It takes real courage to refuse to participate in your own humiliation. It takes real integrity to maintain your composure when someone is actively trying to provoke you. The audience members who had walked out gathered in the lobby, many of them sharing their disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Some pulled out their phones, already texting friends and family about what had happened. Others just stood there, shaking their heads, processing the surreal nature of what they had seen. Inside the studio, crew members whispered among themselves. Many of them had worked with Samuel before. They knew him to be kind, professional, always respectful to everyone from the top executives to the production assistants. Seeing him pushed to that point, seeing him forced to defend himself against such unprovoked hostility, left them uncomfortable and angry. The commercial break couldn't last forever. Eventually, the show had to come back. Savannah returned to her seat, a forced smile on her face. "Welcome back," she said, her voice overly bright. "Well, that was unexpected. Let's move on to our next segment." But moving on wasn't that simple. The internet was already exploding. Clips of the confrontation were being shared across every platform. People were weighing in, and the overwhelming response was clear. Samuel L. Jackson had been ambushed. He had been disrespected, and he had every right to walk away. Some tried to defend Savannah, arguing that tough questions were part of journalism, but those arguments rang hollow. There's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks. There's a difference between holding someone accountable and trying to humiliate them, and everyone who watched that interview knew exactly which category this fell into. What Savannah had failed to understand was that respect is the foundation of any good interview. Even when asking difficult questions, even when challenging someone's perspective, you can do it with respect. You can do it with dignity. You can do it in a way that seeks truth rather than spectacle. She had chosen spectacle. She had chosen confrontation. She had chosen to try to diminish someone who had spent decades earning the respect of his peers and his audience. And in doing so, she had diminished herself. The rest of the show limped along. The other segments felt hollow. The energy was gone. Everyone, from the hosts to the crew to the remaining audience members, knew they had just been part of something that would be talked about for years to come. But not in a good way. Samuel L. Jackson's name would come out of this stronger than ever. People would remember how he handled himself, how he maintained his dignity, how he refused to compromise his values for a television appearance. He would be invited on other shows, where hosts would treat him with the respect he deserved. He would continue making movies. He would continue being the consummate professional he had always been. But for Savannah Guthrie, this moment would follow her. Every future interview would be viewed through the lens of this confrontation. Every tough question she asked would be scrutinized. People would wonder about her motivations. They would question her methods. They would remember the day she crossed the line. The interview had started with what should have been a simple premise. A beloved actor promoting his latest film. A morning show looking for engaging content. It should have been easy. It should have been pleasant. It should have been the kind of feel-good segment that morning television thrives on. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. A reminder that respect matters. That dignity matters. That treating people with basic human decency matters. And that no amount of ratings, no viral moment, no attention-seeking behavior is worth sacrificing those principles. As Samuel's car pulled away from the studio, he looked out the window at the New York streets passing by. He had been in tougher situations. He had faced bigger challenges. This was just another moment in a long career filled with moments. But it was also a line in the sand. A statement that some things are non-negotiable. Your self-respect is non-negotiable. Your dignity is non-negotiable. Your right to be treated with basic human decency is non-negotiable. And if someone, anyone, tries to take those things from you, you have every right to walk away. You have every right to say no. You have every right to choose yourself. That's what Samuel L. Jackson did that morning. He chose himself. He chose his values. He chose to not participate in something that violated his sense of what's right. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to play along. The cameras had captured it all. The initial friendly greeting, the first uncomfortable question, the escalation, the personal attacks, the standing up, the walking away. Every moment was recorded, would be replayed, would be analyzed. But through it all, one thing remained crystal clear. Samuel L. Jackson had walked into that studio as a respected actor with decades of acclaimed work behind him, and he walked out the exact same way. Nothing Savannah Guthrie said, nothing she tried to do, could change that, because respect isn't given by others. It's maintained by yourself, and he had maintained his perfectly. Back in the studio, as the show finally ended, Savannah sat in her dressing room. The silence was deafening. No congratulations from the producers. No excited chatter about the show. Just silence. And in that silence, she had to confront what she had done. She had to face the reality that in her quest for whatever she was seeking, she had forgotten the most basic rule of her profession. Treat people with respect. Ask tough questions, yes. Hold people accountable, absolutely. But never, ever forget that the person sitting across from you is a human being, with feelings, with a career they've built, with dignity that deserves to be honored. It was a lesson learned too late. The interview was over. The damage was done. The moment had passed. And all that was left was the aftermath. An aftermath that would define both of their careers in very different ways. One as a cautionary tale, the other as an example of grace under pressure, of knowing when enough is enough, of understanding that some battles aren't worth fighting and some situations aren't worth being part of. Samuel L. Jackson had made his choice. He had walked away. And in doing